but they are doing so in trying to put forward male figures, Tim Walz being one of them, Doug Emhoff last night, who can speak to men out there who might not be the sort of testosterone-laden, gun-toting kind of guy who wants to listen to Hulk Hogan and the kind of players that came out at the RNC, or might want to listen to that, but also, in addition, understand that it's okay in 2024 to be a man comfortable in his own skin who supports a woman. And
it is the Martha Zoller Show. Dana Bash. She was so uncomfortable talking about this issue, about manly men and all of that. And I just hope that's not what we talk about very much through this campaign cycle. Joining me right now is Charles Gasparino, and he is with Fox Business. He is a senior correspondent there since 2010. He's a New York Post columnist and an author of the book Go Woke, Go Broke. And Charles, one thing I love about your New York Post column, and we're going to talk about that later, is that you're like me, where you're still using a 10-year-old photo when you do columns like that, because we want to look like we never age. It's great.
Who says I aged? One thing, just to gratuitously plug my book, if you read my book, you'll understand how somebody in the media would actually celebrate a effeminate male as like something to aspire to be. Not that I have a problem with effeminate males. I don't. But the cultural shift that says, maleness is a bad thing. If you're male, you're automatically, and, you like sports, you're automatically toxic, is part of the woke culture. And, believe it or not, it seeped in a major way to corporate America. I talk about it. And it's what produced a trans woman in a bubble bath trying to sell Budweiser, or Bud Light to be exact. And, she kind of like, in Dana Bash's sort of inarticulate manner, kind of exposed what wokeness is about. I mean, Doug Emhoff, by the way, may be not your typical testosterone man, but what she left out is, and this is wokeness too in the media, that he knocked up the nanny, didn't he?
Yeah.
We missed about that.
Yeah,
and who knows where the baby is? Is the baby alive? Did they abort it? Did they not? Hopefully they didn't. But you see what I'm saying? I mean, this is like double standards in terms of what actually constitutes a man, and wokeness has a certain sort of generalization of it, and it's a cultural transformation which most people are uncomfortable with. And by the way, getting a little meta here, I don't, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are going to push this wokeness stuff in their campaign. How does that sell to the American people when, as I point out in the book, didn't sell Budweiser, it went from number 1 to number 3 brand, doesn't sell at Disney, stock hasn't moved in 10 years because they can't sell their woke movies, and go down the line. ESG is dying on the vine because people hate woke investing, which is what it is, as I point out. So read the book and find out about it.
Well, there was this moment after 9/11, and I remember this article in particular, and I believe it was in the New York Times, but you're a native New Yorker, so you probably going to know exactly what I'm talking about, where there was this period after, in the days and weeks when they were cleaning up Ground Zero, and you had the guys that came into New York with the briefcases kind of lining the bridge as the firefighters and the police officers and the first responders were coming into work every day, because those were the manly men, if you will, that were having to clean that slot up and clean everything up and have paid the price for it over the years because of the toxic chemicals they had to get involved with. I mean, real toxicity, not fake toxicity like we talk about when we talk about masculinity. Okay, that was real toxicity. And
you're absolutely right. I witnessed it because I covered it. I covered the rebuilding of Wall Street and downtown for the Wall Street Journal at the time. And I'll give you a little more insight. My brother was down there as part of the cleanup efforts. My brother is he's the chairman of medicine at Brooklyn Hospital right now. He's a specialist in trauma and critical care. He went down there because he was working at Bellevue at the time, which is part of NYU, which is a major trauma center. And he went down there because no bodies were coming up, so he went down there, and they put him to work in the bucket brigades. And, I saw what those guys were doing. It was construction workers. It was firemen. It was guys that were just, looking for any sign of life and putting their own lives in danger. How's that? I mean, and that, by the way, they probably like lifting weights. They probably like WWE, World Wrestling Association. And they probably save our country during every war and during every crisis. Just remember that when you want to effeminize men. These are the guys that save your country.
Yeah, it's funny because my husband's a doctor also, and he's a chemist and he's a doctor, and he's a Southerner. Okay, and I remember when my daughter started dating, we have 3 boys and a girl, and she was dating this boy who really wasn't treating her right, and my husband had a few words with him about it, and we didn't see him anymore. And I remember him saying, or my daughter telling me later, she goes, yeah, Max said that your dad was the best educated redneck he'd ever met. And it's true, because he made it very clear that, I may have a Southern accent and I may be a guy with a great education, but if you don't treat my daughter right, there's going to be consequences to pay that I can't say on the radio right now, and he said, I don't want to see you around here anymore because you're not going to treat my daughter like that. And that's what you need.
That's what you need. And, if the Democratic Party wants to feminize American men, go for it. There will be a reaction. And I think that's one of the issues. The other part is we should point out is they're trying to downplay all that now. If you notice,
yes,
lots of American flags at that DNC, and a lot of people. And I saw a couple of guys in camis. I mean, it was like they were trying to put their best masculine foot forward here.
So
and this guy Waltz, the vice president can't supposed to appeal to that, even though I think he's kind of a weak imitation, if you ask me.
So, what do you think about where we are right now? Because if you read your tweets, you're not the biggest Trump fan. You're not the biggest, Kamala Harris fan. You're out there calling it as you see it, calling balls and strikes as it relates to financial news. What do you see, and where do you see where we are right now? Whose election is it to win? Whose election is it to lose?
I really think it's Donald Trump's election to lose. I don't believe, these are bumps that come. First off, most people don't pay attention to this stuff until we get closer, mainly after Labor Day. Monday's Labor Day. Or was it Sunday? I can't remember. I should know this. But
it is Monday.
Okay, there we go. So they don't really pay attention to it. So these bumps are sort of weird. Trump was behind more in past elections. He won. He on the polls. And even though he's got this sort of personality, if you don't know him, he's not a bad. By the way, he's a really nice guy when you get to know him personally.
He is. He's a very. When I've met him, he's been very nice. Yes.
Yes, but if you don't know him, you get the caricature of him, which a lot of, particularly women, don't like. And I think that counts against him. That said, when it comes dollars to donuts, do you really want to give the keys to the kingdom to somebody that has never earned it? She became vice president point blank because Joe Biden wanted a black woman that filled out some other criteria, but mainly he needed that rate. He needed that intersectionality element, and in order to do that, and she fit that bill. She didn't win a primary. She flamed out. She got her rear end kicked by Tulsi Gabbard in one of the debates. Her bright, shining moment was essentially to call Joe Biden a racist over busing, because he was against the federal mandated busing, which is far from racist, by the way. It's like the federal government telling local communities to bus buses, like one of the most harebrained ideas. But it was a debate about that in the 70s. She grew up rich, not poor. She keeps saying she's from the streets. All this stuff. There's just way too much. There's just way too much negatives here. And Waltz, I don't think he gives her much because first off, that state is a mess. He's a mess. Can't keep a straight story. I care less about him fibbing on his military record, but then again, I didn't serve in the military. I know people that do, and they don't like the fact that he said he served and he didn't serve, and or how he was, semantically trying to explain that. But I look at what he did in Minnesota. I mean, while the place is burning, he delays the National Guard. He apologizes for systemic racism while the biggest city gets burned to a crisp. He allows, massive crime. He paintballs people if they came out of their house during his weird COVID lockdowns. He set up a snitch line to snitch on your neighbors. He said he was against free speech. He actually said it. Government should control speech. I don't remember the exact words, but came pretty close to being a First Amendment, a guy who's against the First Amendment. I mean, this guy is just pathetic. And then you throw him in there with her, who they've kept under wraps until, I guess, later tonight on CNN with with that aforementioned Dana Bash, the one who thinks, men should be effeminized. I mean, I just think the American people will see through this. And maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm right. They'll see through it whether she's either after she's elected or before. How's that?
Yeah, and look, I that's what I really love about what you do is that I'm not 100% sure personally what you think about things. I think that you call balls and strikes, and you.
Well, Donald called me a never Trumper a couple weeks ago.
Well, you know who came up with the term "never Trump," don't you?
Who?
J.D. Vance.
Oh,
he was the editor of Red State at the time that Eric Erickson was writing about it, and he says, "Why don't you add #NeverTrump?" So it's very funny that J.D. Vance was the guy that came up with that. Very interesting.
Yeah, I mean, remember, he was a never Trumper. Clearly a never Trumper. I've never been a never Trumper. I called balls and strikes, and I called some strikes on Donald on his spending plans while he was in. And I had a debate about it with
As you should have.
We were talking about inflation and whether that set the seeds for inflation, his spending, and he tweeted or True Social something about Charlie Never Trumper Gasparino got his beat
and
like
Charlie,
a drum
and here's the thing too. I was here with my congressman this week, who we're in a plus 26 Republican district where I live, and I said, if I give you, yeah, thank you. I said, if I give you all the power again, I've done that 3 times in my lifetime, and you don't do what you promised to do about the budget. Okay, so why should I give you all the power again? And, he says, well, we're going to do it different this time. Now, this is a new congressman. He's only been around 4 years, so hopefully he actually will if he's given the keys to the kingdom or if they have the House, the presidency. But we got to be Americans first, and we got to do what's best for the country. And I love New York. I want to see New York come back in a way. My dad came from Jersey City, and so I love New York. And so we'll see where all that plays out. But the book is Go Woke, Go Broke. It is a fantastic read, and I appreciate you being available and really calling the balls and strikes. Thanks, Charles.